The recruiting train rolls on for the University of Utah. They just got a commitment from an elite defensive lineman and have impressed on some recent visits with top recruits. All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media. We can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X today. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's all one word, Locked On College, no spaces, all caps, for $20 off your first purchase today. My name is JG Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by KSL Sports' Alex Napoles. And Alex, the University of Utah just added another recruit. They were able to get a commitment from Sione Motupuaka, and I apologize to Sione if I butchered his last name. He's going to be Sione from here on out, but Sione's a guy you got to be excited about, right? Bishop Gorman. There are certain high schools, as soon as you see their name, Corner Canyon trending towards being one of them, but Bishop Gorman actually beat them this past year because they're still one of probably the 5 most recognizable high school football brands in the country. So anytime you see a Bishop Gorman, you're automatically going to get excited, especially when he's 6'1", 280 pounds, a 3-star defensive lineman. This is a guy that I feel like has a chance to grow into an elite defensive tackle prospect for the University of Utah. When you talk about this Utah team, you know they're going to play really good run defense, and guys like Sione have a great chance to be a part of that, Alex.
Absolutely. I feel like when you look at this Utah team, they've always been consistent with defense, and they've always been consistent with having some big bodies up on that D line and having some really good players on that defensive line. And I think adding a guy like Sione, especially you and I are familiar with the high school scene. We know the kind of players that Bishop Gorman produces. We know the kind of players that come out of that high school. So everything about this guy screams something to be excited about, something to look forward to. And with the coaching staff at the University of Utah, there's no doubt in my mind that we can develop Sione into a very, very good football player on that defensive line.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who, as you mentioned, it's interesting. His 24/7 site has his weight at 250, but if you click on his actual account, it's 280. So he's himself is admitting he's 280. So I'm going to lean towards he's 280. You see guys lie about their height a lot, not as much about their weight. So he says D tackle, D end. I do project him more as a D tackle for Utah. 280. I think that's good size. And I think what you got to like about a guy like Sione is that ability to plug up the middle that I mentioned. Take on 2 blockers at once, free up the linebackers to make plays too, right? And he's got a little bit of explosiveness. I think there's a chance this guy can develop into a little bit more of a pass rusher at Utah. But by far the biggest thing is like he has the shades of the Junior Tafuna, the Alissa Pili, the Sione Motupuaka in terms of a lot. We will not call his name a lot during the game. We only have 2 to 3 tackles. Maybe one time he sheds the blocker himself. He makes the play behind the line of scrimmage. But so often than not, when you look up in the future and whatever linebackers he's playing with, he's the reason the likes of Alander Barton and Karene Reed, they have their tackles pile up. Guys like Sione never generate the headlines, but are essential to Utah football success.
Absolutely. You need those holes. You need those gaps to have guys like the linebackers running through, like Cole Bishop this last season, who's running through those lines and making some great plays. And so you need players like that who are going to be beefy, who are going to be big, who are going to be athletic, who are going to be able to open up those gaps and make some space up front on that D line in order to make those plays and to make those tackles. So very excited for Sione. And I'm excited about this recruit.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who's got a chance to make some plays in Utah, as he did against Corner Canyon. As we mentioned, you actually turn on his highlight video. That's literally his first couple of plays against Corner Canyon. You can see some of that pass rush potential too. I like the way he uses his hands already a little bit. I think that's an encouraging thing. Understands how to gain leverage and just disrupt offensive linemen. So, all I want to see is the tools when you're in high school and have the potential to be turned into an elite player when you go from there. And that's how I feel Sione's got the chance to as well. And when you talk about the future of the Utah defensive tackle position, this is a guy who obviously in Sione, he is we still got to wait until he's a class of 2025 guys. So you got a little bit of time till he comes up. The defensive tackle position is full of the Junior Tafuna, Sione Motupuaka, Alissa Pili, David Fotu, and now Keanu Tanavasa. What do all those guys have in common? Most of them, with the exception maybe being Tanu Vasa, because this is his last year, he really popped off, will not be here by the time he even steps foot on campus. There's a chance Junior and some of these guys come back for another year, but I think it's really likely after this year they look for their next opportunity elsewhere because they've been at Utah for a long time now. And as he said, this is a very underrated position, defensive tackle, but one that is incredibly important. And when you're going to be losing a lot of key contributors like that, if you're Utah, this is where it's really important to kind of load up a little bit on these recruits that'll have the chance to grow and develop, and you hope can become the next elite defensive tackle that stuffs the middle of the field.
Absolutely. And I think in this day and age with where college football is kind of at, you can never guarantee who's going to be back next year, right? People are going to declare, people are going to transfer, people are going to go places. So I feel like it's a safe bet that to bring in young guys, to bring in these recruits and to kind of load up and get ready for your next position, for them to fill in those shoes in that position group. So good security here from Utah, bringing in a guy like Sione.
Yep, they've done a good job securing a good defensive tackle for the future. And look, this is a Utah team that just continues to have success on the recruiting trail. I talked about it I'm going to be talking about it on a show coming up, but the world of recruiting has changed. High school recruiting is no longer the number one thing if you want to be successful. It's maybe 1A, 1B now because of the transfer portals addition as well. But the most successful teams, what do? They bring in transfers, but they have their base, their culture, all of that set up by the recruits you bring in and develop that understand the standard because they've been molded by it. That's what I think Sione has an opportunity to do. And I feel like that standard, Alex, is something that sets Utah apart from a lot of other schools. And I got to believe it's something that attracts these recruits is the opportunity to play right away, get their skills developed to go to the NFL and have an opportunity to win at the collegiate level, knowing if I buy into this system at Utah, I know it has a chance of work because it's worked in the past.
Absolutely. And I think Utah's done a good job of creating a pipeline, not only now to the NFL, but just to a pipeline of bringing in transfers from other schools and bringing these other guys from other schools and developing into something better. And I think that's something that Utah can kind of hang their hat on for the next little bit, especially in this world now of transfers, is just continue to work on developing not only the young guys, but obviously the guys who come in as well.
Yeah, that's where it feels like it's nice that this Utah team is in a good spot to look. We've talked about it a few times on the show. I have no idea what Kyle Whittingham is going to do after this season. He could leave. He could stay a few more years. But no matter what, the culture has been put in place. We know guys from within the program, so the culture is not going to change when the next line of coaches ends up taking over for Utah. So got to feel good about the position that Utah football is currently in. And I'm excited to see what they can do because, yes, they landed the commitment from Sione, but he's not the only one who's been visiting Utah and coming up here recently. Sione was a guy who recently took his visit and decided this is the place for me. I'm going to commit. Utah's hoping to get that with a lot of other guys. I want to talk about two exciting recruits that were recently on the University of Utah's campus for some official visits and see if Utah's got the shot to land them. We're going to be diving into those players in one moment, but first want to talk to you all about our great friends at Gametime. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app, they actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. They have great deals, last minute deals, all in price views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime truly takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can pick out any specific matchup that you'd love to attend if you're talking about the MLB action. But when it comes to the NBA Finals, that's where you just got to let Gametime set you up for success because they have awesome opportunities where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute events for sports, comedy, and concerts and theater events near you. That's all those flash deals, which I love. It allows you to save even more with exclusive in-app deals on selected seats ahead of the game or event. How about the all-in pricing? A tog line that features the shows the total with no surprise fees at checkout. So even that Gametime ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And don't forget about that panoramic view from your seats that allow you to know exactly what kind of a deal you're getting when you make your purchase. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. It's capital L-O and all of college capitalized, but all one word for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alex, the recruiting train continues on for Utah, and they got a really intriguing prospect that they just offered in Mike Matthews, because Micah Matthews is a guy who is a dual threat And I'm not just talking about the fact that he's a 6'2", 205-pound athlete. I'm talking about he's a guy who, when he came on his visits, he actually took one to Utah and BYU. He was also interested in playing baseball for both. And I know there's always that debate about multi-sport athletes. Should he focus on this one? Should he focus on that one? I think it's awesome that he is talented enough to play both at the Division I level. And I think Matthews would be another elite get for this Utah squad.
Absolutely. And I think that just goes to prove kind of the versatility and the athleticism that some of these guys have, is the need and the ability to play those two sports, right? It kind of tells you that this guy's an athlete and he's going to ball out for you no matter where you put him, no matter where he ends up. And so it's a very interesting prospect for Utah, and he'd be a good prospect for this University of Utah side.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to land him. As we mentioned, he's a guy 6'2", 200 pounds, wide receiver / a corner, right? When you're looking at what he can do, number one, offensively, that's where his height is going to stand out right away. And just that speed overall that he possesses, the ability to turn the corner, get upfield, make defenders miss. And he's not afraid to lower his shoulder to give a little bit of a hit, as something that really intrigues me about this guy. And what's the best, when you talk about an elite receiver, what do they have? They have the wingspan, right? That catch radius, and they have really good feet. Where does that also aid you? In being a good defensive back. And I think that's where we can see him. He knows what kind of routes the receivers are going to want to do. If he projects better as a defensive back, he's got the feet to stick with them. He's got the long reach to break up passes too. This is a guy I feel like Alice Whitted at the wide receiver spot. Or if we're looking at it from the offensive or defensive side of the ball, I'm sure Sharif Shaw and Morgan Scalley would all love to get their hands on Alex.
Absolutely. And he's the type of guy that you could, like I said, he's so athletic that you can put him anywhere and he's going to be successful, right? He has the build and the athleticism to be very, very good as a receiver on the offense. And then even guys who play wide receiver and move over to that defensive side, they know the reads, they know what to look for on these routes. And so they have the opportunity to bite and maybe get some interceptions or make some good defensive plays prior to, because they have that mentality and that football knowledge to make sure that they can make that play. So it's good to have guys who can play on both sides of the ball as well.
It is. And Matthews is a guy, look, he's got a lot of interest from other schools, right? We already mentioned the BYU. Maryland wants him. North Carolina, although for football, I'm not as concerned, since we obviously know Utah is a better football program than North Carolina. So that one's not a concern as much to me. Looking at some of the other schools that you got on here overall, when you're looking at Matthews, Virginia, and I think, look, the one thing I will give North Carolina a little bit of credit. If he's going there for baseball, that's the one that makes a lot of sense, because their baseball team is going really well right now. They're in the national championship. So lots of intriguing options. But again, I just go back to this. I love that he's trying to play baseball too. I think it's awesome that he wants to be a dual sport athlete guy. And as a baseball player, he can do a lot of things. I think that you can see him play in several spots on the field if he were able to come up and play for Coach Gary Henderson. But a dynamic dual threat guy, Alex, that I feel like would just be a really good get for this team. And, growing up, I played multiple sports. I didn't get to play them all at the high. Well, I guess I did football and track, but that doesn't count as much. But I just had great experiences playing multiple sports. If Micah is good enough to be able to do them both with the University of Utah, why not? I love it.
Yeah, and there should be no reason why if he's able to do both, there should be no reason why, we should step in and say, oh, you can't do one or the other, right? If he has the ability and he's good enough and he's committed enough to do both, let him do both. And I think he could be successful either way.
Yeah, and what's nice for Utah too is you got Matthews as a guy they're heavily interested in, but he's not the only one, as Utah's also got an offer out and recently had a visit with Shelton Fuller. Fuller's a guy coming out from El Paso, Texas, 6', 185. Utah's looking at him as more of a safety, and a lot of the schools in the West, as well as Big 12 schools, are vying for his services. BYU, Oregon State, Texas Tech, Baylor, all the ones along with Utah who are trying to get in on Fuller. And Steve Bartle recently broke down in a piece his recruiting visit. Sounds like he had a really good time up at the University of Utah. And Alex, if you're a safety and you want to play at the University of Utah, I think it's understandable that you're going to have a good time once you see how Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw want to use you.
There is no better way to play and come in and develop, right, as a defensive back or as a safety than at Utah right now, because you mentioned the coaches. You got two guys who are going to do everything they can to make sure that you are ready to play at the next level, as well as make you a much more intelligent and much more good football player on that in the defense, because they care. You got coaches who care about you as a player, coaches who develop you, and I think obviously that's, if he decides to come to Utah, we're going to see that out of Manny.
Yeah, I think that's what's exciting, is the opportunity he has when he comes up to the University of Utah, being a defensive back who maybe give him some time, but I expect him to be able to make that instant impact in short order. And when you look at him, he played a lot of running back in high school too, as another spot, but I think it makes sense that Utah wants him as a free safety because you just see or free safety, strong safety. I mean, he's a running back, so he's got that size to be built there too, but you see the quickness on tape, the recognition ability that because of that running back background, he's a physical tackler. So he knows what it takes to wrestle down backs. He's a reliable last line of defense. So that's something that's very comforting. If you know, hey, he's back there, like he's got the size, he's got the strength, he can move well too. He's going to be able to anticipate where running backs are going to try to do, read the gaps, play it correctly. So this is a guy as well from just a physical standpoint outside of a cultural fit, I think makes a lot of sense for Utah.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing we talk about with Matthews, right? Is the intelligence and the awareness to play both sides of the ball, to know what to expect from the offense when you're playing that defensive position because you have that knowledge. And JT, I also want to go back to what we talked about earlier with building that culture. And one of the things that stood out to me about Shelton Fuller was the fact that his visit. He said it was way better than expected, and it changed his idea of Utah and what Utah was going to be. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with culture and the culture that Utah has built. So it's amazing to see that pay off as well with the recruits.
It has paid off really well recently for Utah, the culture, that ability to consistently win, and then whether it's a safety for both of these guys we've talked about could potentially be defensive backs. Utah has a pretty good track record of putting defensive backs into the NFL. So going to be competitive with these other schools, but I just love that Utah is low. Look, Utah's going to lose a lot after this year, and the transfer portal is important, but it still starts with building a program through recruiting. And that's why I think it's really important that Utah is getting hits, not striking out, is getting hits in the recruiting trail, that they are able to gain momentum for themselves. And I just like the direction, the way this team is headed in, even though they're going to lose a lot. It feels like they're on the cusp of adding a lot of talented players. And it's not just the football team that has talented players, right? Look at Alissa Pili on the WNBA side. And that's what we're going to be talking about, because Alissa Pili, if you look at Nick DePaul, who's kind of like the sneaker analyst for the NBA, the WNBA, he does a lot of boardroom, does some ESPN stuff, but covers shoes. Good follow on X. Either way, this is what he put out recently. Nike has signed Minnesota Lynx rookie Alissa Pili to an endorsement deal as an N7 athlete. It's a community impact category supporting Indigenous access to youth sports. And this is an awesome opportunity for Pili, who we know, of course, that her family is so important to her. Her leg tattoo tells a story about kind of her family and just what they mean to her too, and just so excited for her. And I just love that she's really kind of found her stride in the WNBA. Had some shaky games early on, but as of late has started to take off, and you love seeing good things happen to great people, especially when they played at the University of Utah. And Alissa Pili fits under both of those categories.
Yeah, and it's an amazing initiative, and I think it's something that obviously she's going to be super proud of to be able to join, because N7 does a lot for Indigenous communities and Native American communities, and donating money and building up those communities to make sure that they have the ability to go on and play sports. And so for her to kind of be a representative of that, it's amazing, not only for her, but I think also on the women's sports side, for them to sign a WNBA player to this deal. I think it's amazing, not only for Pili, but for the women's game as well. Yeah,
the women's game is really growing a lot. And that's where I'm glad that Alissa gets to be a part of the WNBA at this time, right? Like, if you look at some of her recent games, obviously had that big one back on the 31st where she had 20 against Phoenix, but just feels like she's kind of continued to grow into her own, get a little bit better. If you look at some of her recent outings in June, right, against the Sparks, had 8 points, 4 against Phoenix, and only had 1 in a recent game against Seattle. But that's how it goes when you're a rookie. You're going to have up and downs, especially when you're playing in a time where the WNBA talent is arguably as good as it's ever been before. But really fired up that Alissa has this scholarship opportunity. And I also love it, obviously, because she's on my Minnesota Lynx, my WNBA team too. It's been fun rooting for her and watching her go along too. But just a sneaker deal at this time too, the extra financial aspect that it provides anytime you get it. I think it's just really exciting for Alissa that things are, just trending towards. You're not guaranteed a roster spot in the WNBA. I want to say that too. I think because I realized that when Brenna Maxwell, the first pick of the second round by the Chicago Sky, she was cut right away. So even though Alissa was a first round pick, like, things happen. And it seems like she's really steadied her way in there. And I think she's a part of the Lynx long-term plans now, Alex.
100%. And you can, and like you mentioned, it's going to take time for her to kind of get used to the game. It's a very different game from the college game. But if anybody has the tools to be successful in the WNBA, Alissa Pili is one of them. And I think that she's going to have a nice and illustrious career with the Lynx.
I feel that way too. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. Just like Alex, I'm always excited when I get an opportunity to sit down and talk all things Utah athletics with you. You are a busy man, so tell a lot of people what you have going on.
Absolutely. Right now, we're getting ready for football season. We're getting ready for some Stanley Cup finals. That's coming up here soon, as well as the NBA finals. So just providing coverage for all that through KSL Sports. So yeah, just make sure to go follow KSL or go follow me at Napoles Alex, just right there below for all sports, Utah sports updates.
Well, Alex, always appreciate you stopping by. Thanks again, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but don't forget, there is still a lot going on. We scratched the surface of the recruiting news. There is so much else going on in the world, whether it's various rankings being posted. How is Utah going to fare soon? And I also got a really fun episode coming up on Wednesday, tomorrow's show. We're going to start to get to know a little bit more about the other Big 12 schools. It's a new series we're launching on Locked On Utes called Know Your Foe. We'll be learning about our new conference opponents. Hope you'll join us for tomorrow's show, as well as the rest of the week. We continue to talk Utah athletics on Locked On Utes.